Hi, everybody. This is Politics by Jake, and this is the edition for the 21st of June, 7 a.m. And we're back with another edition. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about, and there's just so much going on in the world today and in the country with this election. And it's ominous. Quite frankly, it's ominous. And you know from listening that here at Politics by Jake, we are very concerned about the spread of fascism, not only in the country and the world. And there are several different types of fascism, as I have told you. There's even a type of fascism, and this is the great thing about the computer age. You can look it up. You can go to Wikipedia and look at fascism, and it lists the various types. And one of them is clerical fascism. And clerical fascism is, of course, it has to do with the church being fascist. And this is honest to God thing. I'm not going to go into it to a great extent right now, but look it up. It's just really amazing. And we're concerned about that. And we feel that the nation needs to be mobilized against fascism, and especially against a certain kind of fascism is called MAGA fascism. And MAGA, of course, is the confused acronym for Make America Great Again, and it's a rehash of the America First campaign that was headed to a great extent, not only, but to a great extent by Lindbergh in the 1930s. Now, as far as today's show is concerned, we're going to be talking about the situation with Hunter Biden, and I researched this, and there's quite a bit of material on it, and it's going to be probably about the one segment that we do today. We're going to be talking about that. And we're going to be talking about the fact that this is all a setup. It's all a frame up to a great extent, and why that is, and go into some of the players. But I found in researching it that there's just this goes back to like 2017. There's just a tremendous amount of machinations, and it's basically a hit job. When you look at it, the only thing that you conclude is that it's a hit job. So that is what we are going to spend. And of course, he was just recently found guilty. So that is what we're going to spend a lot of time on. And I'm going to try to explain some of the things that I see in it, which are apparent from the record. They are kind of my opinion, but they're not merely my opinion. They're based on objective facts that are obtainable from the record. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you about an article, because there's just an overwhelming, and I'm going to read the article. It's by Rachel Bidikofer, and I think she's pretty good. I use her as a source sometimes. And I'm just going to read this to an extent verbatim and make a couple of comments on it, because it states the concern that we here at Politics by Jake have about what's going on in the country and the consequences. And it's entitled, America is about to go through some things, one way or another. This darkness got to give. And this is a long article, and one of this thing that I'm going to read right now is just from the end. And she says, more than 40 million Americans believe in an alternative reality in which Donald Trump never did anything wrong, Dr. Fauci should be in jail, and the entire FBI, CIA, and DOJ are a vast left-wing conspiracy, even while all three of those agencies are dominated by Republicans. This despite ongoing federal prosecutions of several Democratic politicians, Menendez of the Senate is one of those, and the president's own son. It's a mass psychosis, and beating Trump in November is not likely to end it, not so long as the leadership of the Republican Party continues to lie to their own base. The probability MAGA will turn to political violence after a Trump loss is high. And she talks about Greg Abbott. She says, it's Greg Abbott. That's the governor of Texas, by the way. And he's kind of unhinged. He's always doing crazy things. And she asks the question, she says, is Greg Abbott crazy enough to push a modern secessionist movement? Anyone who tells you no doesn't follow Greg Abbott. And I kind of agree with that, because he's always doing wacky, crazy things. And there is a strong secessionist movement, and that's something for us to talk about, but we're not going to talk about it now, in the state of Texas. And and win or lose, she says, going back to the article, America is going to go through some things. Just remember, no matter what happens if Trump loses, it will pale in comparison to what will happen to us if he wins. And she says, vote like your life depends upon it, because it does. And this is correct. It does. This is an extremely serious situation that we're in right now. And at Politics by Jake, we talk about it all the time because the government is infiltrated. The Supreme Court is an excellent example with ideologues, religious fanatics. That would be Amy Coney Barrett. Thank you very much. And we've talked about her. And is headed up by a conservative that literally made his bones and got his place as Chief Justice on the court because he was willing to write an opinion called Citizens United, which basically allowed big money to get into politics. And based on the premise, among some other things, if you read the case, but based on the basic premise that money is speech. And that corporations have more money so that they are allowed more speech. And so, in other words, basically what you've done with Citizens United is, and that's Chief Justice John Roberts, by the way, is you've created a 2 or 3 tiered democracy, which is, completely ridiculous. The sacred franchise of the vote, which you hear me talk about often, is under attack. And it's been under attack because the Republicans are not able to get what they want by means of elections. And so they have to do these other things. And your franchise, your sacred franchise to vote, is under attack as never before. And as a consequence of that, we need to talk, and we do talk here incessantly at Politics by Jake about the need to become informed and become aware. And one of the things we're going to be talking about today is, as I said, Hunter Biden. And before we get that, let me just say that you can find me at my YouTube page if you want to hear more about these things. I have videos and podcasts. That is youtube.com/@politicsbyjake, where I have not only these podcasts, but lots of videos, a lot of other material that unfortunately, because of time, we don't always get to on this show. And of course, Facebook, where right now my page is under Lawrence Jacobson, but can also be found on Broadcasting for America and can also be found on KCAA Listeners Group. On Twitter X, where my handle is JakeLaw08. That's JAKELAW08. We want to get that changed, but that's what it is right now. You can also see my political comments there. And if you like baseball or hockey, sometimes you can see me talk about that, but that's basically what I talk about on there. So I invite you to visit those. And in just a minute, we will go ahead and we will talk about basically what is the chief thing that we're going to talk about, which is the setup and frame up of Hunter Biden. And this is Politics by Jake. And now let's pause for a brief commercial message. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting, and I'm back again to talk to you about one of these little wrinkles that can cause a lot of problems and a lot of happiness for people who actually want to own a business, or who have just started a business, or who have been operating a business now for some time. It doesn't really matter. My guess is that you wanted asset protection. That's one of the reasons for starting a business. You wanted to grow wealth, and you wanted to protect the wealth that you created, and you thought that a limited liability company or a corporation would be the way to do that. But did you know that just creating a corporation or a limited liability company does not guarantee that at all? Do you want to know if there's any way to fix that? Go to www.jakelaw.me. That's JAKELAW.me, and watch my video where I talk about this very important thing, and then set up a time where we can have a phone conference, or call me directly now at 573-454-1168. That's 573-454-1168. Call now. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. And this is Politics by Jake. And this is one of the things that you all know, that as a consequence of this, I don't report it, because this is basically a hit on Hunter Biden. And we're talking about the trial of Hunter Biden. And it's a frame up. And I know that a tremendous amount of media sources have already mentioned the Hunter Biden trial, but they're not mentioning it in the way it should. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, or actually at some length. This is in Wilmington, Delaware, which is where the Bidens live. But as usual, they are propaganda pieces. They are not really delving into it very much in what I would consider to be a responsible journalistic way. So now I want to talk about this a little bit because some things have now kind of completely formulated, and I feel like I have some things that I want to say about this. So this, of course, involves the so-called gun charges that in filling out a detailed application to purchase a gun in Wilmington, Delaware, the accusation is that Hunter Biden was asked, "Are you currently an addict? Are you an addict?" And he said no. And the first thing I look at when I see this is I say to myself, well, okay, this is a subjective question. In fact, it is an enormously subjective question because Biden is not a medical professional. Number two, looking at it from Hunter Biden's point of view, at the time he's filling out the application, he may not think he's an addict. Number three, a very strong argument can be made that Hunter Biden does not have the capability to say, because what we're talking about here is we're talking about a medical opinion. This is a medical opinion that he cannot, at the point when he is filling out that application, actually say, because he doesn't have the knowledge to actually say whether he's an addict or not. What does it take to prove that you're an addict or not an addict? So I think this is a very weak basis, actually, for attempting to bring down criminal consequences on someone's head. And I think by now, it's quite obvious that this is the MAGA technique. MAGA stands for Make America Great Again. This is weaponization of the judicial process. And we're seeing a lot of it, which is one of the reasons why you hear me talking about the Supreme Court and other parts of the judiciary so much, because this is the plan of MAGA fascism, to weaponize the courts. And this is the construction in this particular case, in the Hunter Biden prosecution, of a frame-up by the MAGA forces with the idea that they can inflict a damage and an embarrassment on Biden. More suffering for him and his family. And remember, this is now his only surviving son. So more suffering on the family also of Hunter Biden and his wife and his children. He's got a blended family in a number of directions, and it's evident that they, and again, I'm referring to the MAGA forces and these frankly disgusting tactics, like showing photos of Hunter Biden's penis, of all things, mocking him. And of course, wouldn't you know it, but what it was Marjorie Taylor Greene, who seemed all too happy to be the front person to humiliate Hunter Biden in these hearings, where she displayed these photos, which they're scandalous and impertinent, and in a court of law they would have been stricken because they have nothing to do with anything. And none of these hearings with Hunter Biden have anything to do with anything, because Hunter Biden is not running for office. It's the legislative arm of a more comprehensive frame-up against the Biden family. And this is another thing about these House hearings, by the way. In so many situations with the MAGA fascists, they're not brought for the purpose that has anything to do with the people's business. Hunter Biden's penis or genitalia that has nothing to do with the people's business. Certainly humiliating someone by showing naked photos of them under color of the authority of the House committee hearing is not something that I would call the people's business. I would call it pandering. I would call it irresponsible, reprehensible, scandalous, impertinent, and again, not something that supposedly responsible members of the House, certainly humiliating someone by showing naked photos with them under color of the authority of the House committee hearing, is not something I would call the people's business. I would call it pandering. I would call it irresponsible. I would call it reprehensible. I would call it scandalous. I would call it impertinent, because Hunter Biden's not running for anything. And it has nothing to do with perhaps a legitimate observation with regard to his being able to have an effect on an American election, except from the standpoint of MAGA, which wants to shame and humiliate the Biden family as much as possible and to cast doubt upon them for their own fascist purposes. And it's not something that supposedly responsible members of the House should be engaging in. But of course, these subpoena dodging members of the House, I would hardly call them responsible. and I would hardly call what they're doing responsible. But as I said, the reason they're doing this is to increase the suffering and embarrassment and the humiliation to the Biden family, and in the eyes of low information electorate that will pay attention to these things and think that these things like this matter. And I was just looking at one the other day where Josh Hawley, the senator from Missouri, who is one of the ones who was supporting of the insurrection on January 6th. And so I therefore feel pretty comfortable using the working definition of fascism, which is reactionary, backwards looking beliefs. I used the example of taking the vote away from women. That's a reactionary belief. Returning African Americans and others to a condition of chattel slavery, 3/5 of the man. This is a reactionary belief. This is a backwards belief. These are two examples, some of the more extreme examples that I make in order to make the point. But this is what Hawley is. He supported the insurrectionists who, in the opinion of we here at Politics by Jake, he knew about the insurrection in advance by giving them the closed fist salute. So I feel pretty comfortable saying that Josh Hawley is a fascist, because the other part of fascism is the participation in or the support for violence in the political process in order to support these reactionary beliefs. So there you go. But what I have to say is I think they're doing is that, in other words, what is behind this is that they really wish to bring about this, aforementioned humiliation, embarrassment, suffering, and it speaks to the rage and the mania that is in their mind. It speaks to how very powerfully and how they actually feel. They present an outward picture of decorum, but inside, and they use the legitimacy and the color of authority of their positions as congresspersons and the legislative people in the august House of Representatives. But inside, they're raving maniacs and they're lunatics in human form. Okay, so now how did they do it? In other words, how did they get the conviction? How did they do the frame up? How did they do the setup job that they did on Hunter Biden? Well, back under Trump, under a pro-Trump weaponized DOJ, a U.S. attorney was named by the Trump forces, and there were actually two of them. You had Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. No, that's his name. That's sort of kind of his name. His name is Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. Sessions. I joke and I talk about secession. I change his name from Sessions to Secessions. But his name is actually Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. And this is one of the guys, which is why I kind of make a mock of the name, because he was one of the attorney general. The other one was Bill Barr for Trump at one time. And this is one of those things that it shows you the true colors of people. And that, which is one of the reasons why Marjorie Taylor Greene is so important. We've talked about her. Her town was in the path of Sherman's March to the Sea, and it was dealt with very harshly, which was the idea that Sherman had, because the idea of the March to the Sea was to cut a swath through the Deep South and make it so that the South could not wage war anymore. And they destroyed any industry there. They destroyed the agriculture and so on and so forth. So they don't think necessarily people make the connection, but I want to help you make the connection. I as I said before, I realize you guys are doing other things. You're listening to me, and I kind of consider it my job here at Politics by Jake to bring some of this stuff up and make you aware of things that you probably have forgotten in your history classes, and maybe you didn't want to know. But this is the importance of the American political system and the sacred franchise of the vote, as we often say, and it matters to know these things. And now let's pause for a brief commercial message. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting, and have you ever tried to get a business credit line? If you did, what's one of the unpleasant things that you found out? You found out that the only way that you can get business credit is if you personally guarantee each and every single loan, each and every single commercial credit line. Now, let me ask you this question. How did that make you feel? If you're like me, I would feel like they were giving with one hand and taking away with the other. If this bothers you, I encourage you to go to my website, www.jakelaw.me, where I talk about this and several other important products and services that can benefit really almost all people listening to the sound of my voice. Call me at 573-454-1168 so we can talk about this, get mad about it together, and see if there isn't some sort of solution. That's www.jakelaw.me. That's JAKELAW.me, M-E. That's www.jakelaw.me, and the phone number is 573-454-1168. And now let's get back to Politics by Jake. He's talking about some very interesting things here, and you'll want to stay tuned. So without further ado, back to Jake. So that's what we're doing here. So I want to help you make the connection. In this case, it is one of those people. He is one of those people. Sessions is this kind of person that I'm talking about. He was the Attorney General, and he's from South Carolina. And why does this matter? Because South Carolina has long been known, ever since 1861, as the cradle of secession. And why is it known as the cradle of secession? Well, quite simply, because that is where the Civil War started. Fort Sumter is out there in the harbor, and it was attacked. And it is so notable an event. And once again, you have to understand the animus, the spirit, and the zeitgeist. And zeitgeist is kind of a German word. It means the spirit of the times. It hasn't changed from the way it was in 1860. As far as that same spirit is concerned, Jefferson Davis was one president. He was the one president of the Confederacy. And this person was named Jefferson. His first name is Jefferson, after Jefferson Davis, the only president of the Confederacy. And his second name, Beauregard, is the name of the general who ordered the cannons to begin firing on Fort Sumter. And again, this general's name is P.G.T. Beauregard, and that stands for Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard. And this is literally the name of the person who started the Civil War. He is the one who ordered the shelling to begin on Fort Sumter, as I said, in the harbor out there. And this is the thing that I want to point out and make completely clear so that you understand the animus behind these people in this section of the country. This person was named Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. He was named after two of what they consider down there to be the great heroes of the region. First, of course, Jefferson Davis, and second, this fellow P.G.T. Beauregard. And these are names we here at Politics by Jake should be held and should live and generally be looked upon in infamy. Because the start of the Civil War was the beginning of the death and misery and suffering of hundreds of thousands of souls of the United States. And it was an attempt to perpetuate something that had caused the deaths and misery of hundreds of thousands, untold thousands of people in slavery who should have been free. And yet here we have a person who is named for two of the villains, two of the greatest villains who actually started this war and initiated this suffering. And of course, we're coming up in July on the anniversary of Gettysburg. And there are actually several other things going on at the same time in 1863. And everybody thinks it's okay down there. Nobody says anything about it. They think it's perfectly respectable. And one of the reasons I know that everybody thinks it's okay is because they don't know what it is I just told you. And if it needed to be repeated, we here at Politics by Jake think that this is not okay. We think that the naming of people with this incredible distraction, this incredible, frankly, irredeemable sense of pique and opposition that exists down there, even to this day, and I'm talking about the South, and I'm talking about places like South Carolina, is something that needs to be brought out, is something that needs to be understood. And I say this by way of explanation and an expansive elaboration, giving my opinion, of course, as well, so that you understand that when you see MAGA fascism in the guise of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, who comes from a district in Georgia, as I said, where Sherman and the district she comes from is Rome, General Sherman, in his march to the sea, which was intended to basically destroy the South's ability to wage war, destroy their farms, destroy their crops, destroy their injuries, such as it was, freeing the slaves, which were the backbone of their industry, because I guarantee you that these plantation owners, they weren't out there on their hands and knees picking cotton themselves. And this was the idea of the March to the Sea. And Sherman, as I say, I'm repeating myself, but it bears repeating that Sherman went right through Marjorie Taylor Greene's birthplace, which is, of course, Rome, Georgia. Anyway, I think you get the idea on that. And by the way, speaking of attorney generals, and one of the things that Jeff Sessions is that he was basically a steward for Trump in the Justice Department. In other words, he held Trump's coat, so to speak, and was an instrument for Trump in doing the kinds of things that Trump wanted to do. And by the way, you also have Bill Barr, very same type of person. He was the successor to Sessions as the attorney general. And again, they are both, or were, still would be, the blatant stewards of Trump and whatever he does, and that won't change. In fact, that's really what he was. So anyway, they brought in and they kept this guy Weiss. David Weiss is the prosecutor on this gun case, and Joe Biden, I think, committed a very, very serious mistake. When he came into office, he said, basically, look, I'm not stacking the deck in favor of Hunter, even if he is my only son at this point. I'm not going to fire Weiss. I'm going to leave him. And this is a Trump hitman, of all things. I'm going to leave him in place so that I can say I didn't hit the scales in favor of my own flesh and blood. Now, look, the short analysis here is social science is aware that when a liberal democratic forces, people who care about voting, they care about representative government, the rule of law, things like this. When a liberal democratic government replaces a more authoritarian, dictatorial, oppressive, illegal type of government, there's an unfortunate tendency to fetishize the hyper-technical details and the formalisms of positive law. And this is the province of these more authoritarian, dictatorial, oppressive styles of government. And again, positive law, it's always bad. This is a recurring topic here on Politics by Jake. You hear me talk about from time to time, when you hear me talk about the doctrines of originalism. And by the way, Elena Kagan's stunning statement at the Senate Judiciary hearings in 2010 that we are all originalists now. And I say stunning because originalism is a constitutional heresy, and its twin, or perhaps I should say kissing cousin, textualism. These all fall under the larger rubric of legal positivism. And for those of you who study the Bible, you are familiar with, if you will excuse me, in Politics by Jake, we don't typically refer to this, but this is pretty good. And I know that a lot of you study the Bible, or some of you at least, or you grew up and you're familiar with it. You're familiar with that saying that the letter kills, but the spirit gives life. And that is exactly the heart of legal positivism, the letter of the law. And I don't want to get off track, so that's all I'll say about that for now. So moving on, it's always going to lead you in, we've had this, it kind of came up earlier in the Trump years, right? Do you want a kind of a more punctilious, holier than thou kind of defense? I would never interfere with my partner, Department of Justice. It's totally independent. But what about this? What happens if you're the attorney generals of a fool and of a toddler and a feckless and impotent and variable character, one about whom it can truly be said that that you can tell whenever they're lying because their lips are moving? I'm sorry. Excuse me. That's funny. I think that's funny. You can tell that they're lying because their lips are moving. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, Hi, I'm Jake with Twain Consulting for my great product, Get It in Writing. Did you know that the Wall Street Journal, Entrepreneur Inc., all prominent business periodicals say that 80% or more of all businesses are operating without the proper stable of business forms, and that there are 10 absolutely positively essential business forms that businesses should have, but that they don't have? As a business owner, do you want to avoid growing pains in your business? Do you want to minimize client confusion, missed opportunities, bad business dealings, lawsuits? Well, that is what Get in Writing is designed to do. This program is designed to keep you out of trouble, streamline your business, and make you more profitable. If you were to go out and buy all these forms individually, you could wind up spending more than $25,000. $25,000! Amazing! But if you take advantage of this opportunity, you will spend far, far less than even $1,000. Go to my website now, www.jakelaw.me, or call me now at 573-454-1168. Call now! Save now! And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. So what do you do then? You've got to be able to call up and say, you've got to go back to your source and say, why don't you get to work and defend what the preamble mandates? The common defense, the general welfare, the blessings of liberty, domestic tranquility. How about that? How about wanting to arrest a few people who are attacking domestic tranquility, like Bill Barr, like Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like MAGA Mike Johnson? We'll have more to say about him soon. I'm not going to talk about him right now, but I have plenty to say about MAGA Mike. And like many more than what I have mentioned here. Insurrectionists who supported a fake scheme to supplant the rightful, lawful electors of the College of Electors, who blatantly and attempted in the eyes of the entire nation to supplant the lawful results of a lawfully conducted and constitutionally sanctioned. And by the way, did you know, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting off on a collateral matter here, but did you know that in a certain kind of legal positivist way, that those who say, and it was Antonin Scalia, by the way, who's interesting, who was the first to so vocally, that reactionary, that son of a Nazi supporter, that there is no explicit right to vote? Look in the Constitution. If you want to look at it from a legal positivist, originalist, textualist point of view, you can't find it, not explicitly. It's not there. Then go ahead and look at the Bill of Rights. You can't find it. Look at the other amendments to the Constitution. You can't find it. And, you know, we here at Politics by Jake think that it's high time, considering the desperate danger that democracy finds itself in right now, that there was a constitutional amendment. Just a simple statement. Words to the effect that every citizen shall have the right to vote in all federal and state elections. Congress shall have the power to enforce this right by all appropriate legislation. Bam. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. So, okay, getting back to this Hunter Biden thing. Of course, Biden felt that this too, but with Garland, he'd completely covered himself. He shouldn't have appointed Garland. Garland's an iconoclast. We'll say something about him here. So I just don't think it works that way. I don't like this. And our slogan here at Politics by Jake, one of them anyway, is no fairness to fascists. So you want to give them, I think, the letter of the law, but not special privileges above and beyond the letter of the law, because the spirit is going to be helping, because the severity of the law has to be the non-legal positiveness. It has to be. Like I said, to all you people who like the Bible, the letter killeth, the spirit giveth life. And because it is this way for the United States and for the world, honestly, frankly, it has to be natural law justice, which is justice, it's morality, it is freedom. And these are the things that I think of this. This is the natural law, which are generally reflected in the preamble. Go look at it. That's what it says. It talks about the reasons for establishing the Constitution. You don't need to quibble. Just read the preamble and you find out all about it. It's right there. And as I said, that's natural law. That is what is called natural law. All right. So From this, we hear at Politics by Jake says, it follows that you don't make a big show out of fetishizing like Kagan did it or hearing that, quote, we're all originalists now, the hyper-technical formalism of legal affairs, whether the Department of Justice is completely independent, and it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to serve the will of the president, but not to the extent, I repeat, that it bends over backwards for a fool or a dictator or a king, not a state within a state, or whether it's being told to do from time to time. I know they may not, individuals, but say, look, we've just had a rebellion. They'll say about it, that's that. Already good, those things have to be allowable, because otherwise the Department of Justice becomes a state within a state. And it's going to be the plaything of somebody that is like I described, somebody like Trump. And it's going to be, in this case, it's often the controlled, corrupt, cynical, nihilistic corporate media. It was a mistake to leave that guy Weiss there. And then later, Weiss demanded from Garland that he be made a special prosecutor, a special counsel. And Garland, of course, with this frankly naive, although, with Garland, honestly, I think it's more that he still thinks that if he makes nice with the Republicans, that when they get back in power, as he supposes, they will nominate him for the Supreme Court. I really think that's one thing that he thinks. But Garland rushed to give him what he wanted. So that's where we get today. So the team doing this in Delaware is this guy Weiss and one of his top sidekicks, this character Hines, I believe. And what they're doing is a railroading. It's a miscarriage of justice. It's a frame-up. It's a mockery. It's designed to railroad Hunter Biden. Now, there was a jury, and we're told that the jury was, first of all, impressed by the fact that everybody in Delaware knows who their senator is and has been another president or, a vice president for 50 years, since 1972. They've known that Biden is that, so that says something. And then, once again, more than half the jury are Black Americans. Now, as I've said before, the Black community is at best the conscience of America. The Black community, if things are working well, is functioning as the conscience of this entire country. And you could argue that this is a saving grace to the United States that they are among us because of the fact that they operate in that function. Now, of course, the jury, and this gets into the whole idea of the Fully Informed Jury Act, which I haven't talked about much, but again, we will. Just wait, we'll get there. And that's where the jury gets to decide not only the matters of fact, but the matters of the law also, which typically has been reserved to the province of the judge, but this was not always the case. So they were prevailed upon by legal positivists to decide this case pursuant to the letter of the law. That's too bad. And let me tell you a little bit about why I think that that is too bad. And this is because I think there's a pretty good chance that at least one or two of the people in the jury should, if they had been instructed correctly, and I haven't looked at the jury instructions, but this is just me gauging conjecture here, and had not been so compelled by the overarching, if you will excuse the expression, dignity and majesty of the court, the dignitas and majestas of the court, and the instructions that they were giving, I think that there was every chance that they could have found that there was a reasonable doubt. And I'm going to go into this. And the reasonable doubt comes from the fact that the government was unable to produce a witness who had seen Hunter Biden using crack cocaine or some of those things during the relevant time when this application was made. They couldn't do it. They couldn't corroborate it. Not at all. Now, a couple of other things about it. The first one is that it's all about the application. That's the focal point, where it says, I'm not an addict. Where's the application? We want to see the original paper copy. Now, it would be possible for Weiss to run the cover-up, because that's what it is. Again, make no mistake, this is a hit. This is a setup. This is a frame. That he's running the frame. It wouldn't be possible under these circumstances. I said possible, I meant impossible, were it not for Judge Mary Ellen Noriega, who is like, she's a Trump appointee, just like Weiss, the prosecutor. She and he are creatures of Trump. So now we got the Noreika, and pardon me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, it's capital Noreika. So now we have got Noreika and Eileen Cannon of Miami, a faction of the federal district judges that is people who are unable to frame up in the service of Trump. Noreika, and she said that she rules that the government does not have to produce the note, produce the paper, produce the document which is involved. And this is clear error. And now let's pause for a brief commercial message. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting, and I'm back. And what I want to talk to you about now is something I call virtual invisibility. No, not literal comic book type invisibility. What I am talking about is a practical invisibility, a kind of invisibility where you cannot be seen, where your personal transactions are shielded, where your business affairs are hidden from prying eyes, where a purchase of certain items is far less likely to be able to be found out by persons who have an intent to do you and your loved ones harm, the kind that results in the preservation and the protection of your personal assets, your business assets, all for your benefit and the benefit of your loved ones, the ones you are doing all this for in the first place. That's virtual invisibility. Crazy, you say? No, this exists. It's a thing. Want to know more? Contact me either at my website, www.jakelaw.me, or call me direct at 573-454-1168. Do it now. Become invisible now. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. This is an appealable issue. Hunter should get a stay of sentence, and remains to be seen, or be allowed to be out on bond during an appeal, because this is clear error. And let me tell you why. It's reversible error. This is the language that an appeals court would use, because apparently there's writing on that piece of paper in different colored ink. There's, for example, an extreme red. There's a kind of a pinkish type of ink. And then I guess there's some black and blue. But there it is. And where is it? You know, it used to be, if you're trying to foreclose on my house, for example, produce the note. Show me the note. So we here at Politics by Jake say, produce the damn application that you say condemns him to become a federal criminal. And it's ridiculous. As I said, it's appealable error. It is grist for the pertinent court of appeal. If you are basing your entire case on this document, the prosecution has to. It's part of the rules of criminal procedure. They have to produce any evidence that would tend to either completely or partly exculpate the defendant. The prosecution has to do that. And yet here we have yet another Trump appointee who says no. And let me tell you that it is plainly wrong. You can't say we're convicting you based on what you said in this document and then have the judge say that the defense can't see the document, that the jury can't see the document. Now, the other side of it is that we look at it. By the way, I'd like to recommend to follow this, that I've been trying to follow this as best that I can, that the media have fallen down on this. Essentially, it's this. The media paid a lot of attention to the Trump trial in New York City, and he was found guilty on 34 counts. Now, the controlled, corrupt, and stupid corporate media now say this. Well, now, we've got to do something, and I'm engaging in conjecture here, but I think it's educated. This is the both sidesism idea, that the underlying, philosophy that by inference they're trying to convey, which is nonsense, is that, we're really not in favor of Biden and against Trump. But we're just as much against Biden as we are against Trump. So therefore, we've got to wink and support this frame up of Hunter Biden, because, again, that's what it is. It's a frame up. So therefore, nobody seems to stress the fact that the critical piece of paper on which this stuff all depends is the most lacking. And you think they would, wouldn't you? You think that the media would bring that out, wouldn't you? Seems relevant to me. And the fact that, because what I told you about the different color ink and writing that was on it, that it was apparently tampered with by employees of this place. And it's called Starlight Gunshot. I can't remember the name. It's a gun store in Wilmington. These are people who then, when he didn't pick it up on time, maliciously went out and turned it over to who? Well, we don't know. We don't know. Because guess what? There's no chain of custody of the evidence. And what is that? Well, in a crime, when you're investigating the chain of custody of the evidence, that is, who handled it, and precisely or as close as can be figured, and ideally this should occur at the very time evidence changes hand. There should be a record of all of that. When they handle it, it's standard investigative procedure. But here, there is no chain of custody, which, as I said, is absolutely, positively required. And if you don't have a chain of custody, you don't have evidence. Or putting it another way, you have a piece of evidence that is impeachable and colored. And if you have a case that is based on that, that is a loser for the prosecution. Well, in this case, that's, pretty much what we have here. That's where we are. We don't have an actual chain of custody. So that goes for the multicolored form. So it's two employees of the gun shop, and again, pardon me, I think that's the name, who had it for a while and who came back and made changes to this document, as you can only suppose, and that they withheld for 3 years after the original incident. And the thing I think is clear, just from the reports of the facial characteristics of the document, is that they came back and doctored it. They changed it. They falsified it. So, what the hell is that? So that's one, okay? And then, of course, is why can't you produce that? And as I said, that's an appealable issue, because what we're talking about here is the basis for convicting someone, which is, number one, to have a document that is prima facie evidence, that's legitimate evidence, and number two, which is to follow the rules and be able to produce that document. And this, I know you don't know this, but trust me, this is absolutely, positively is a basic thing in the rules of criminal procedure and discovery. It's something that you have to do. And then, of course, we've got this laptop, the infamous Hunter Biden laptop. And there again, it's the same thing. What's the chain of custody? How long was it in the hands of Rudy Giuliani, who, by the way, he's on his way. He's been disbarred, as far as I know, and he's on his way to, most likely, to one felony conviction or another in one or the other of these cases. He's been found subject to civil liability for the brutal harassment of Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman in Atlanta. And you recall, these are the election workers who were harassed and intimidated and bullied in this brutal way that they were. And this guy is absolutely unreliable. And that's the one who had it. He's the one who had the laptop that they all talk about. The laptop, the laptop, the laptop. And I have to remember, we just also had Andrew Weissman, just to give you some background on him. He was the assistant United States attorney when he prosecuted. He was the lead prosecutor in Robert Mueller's special counsel office, the chief of the fraud section in the Department of Justice, and currently a professor at NYU. And we had him come out and say, the FBI is totally bipartisan, totally fair, and so forth. And of course, I have to say, I'm afraid that this is ridiculous. How far do you want to go back on this to talk about the legitimacy of the FBI? How about Comey, once the director of the FBI, who brutally interfered, gave the election to Trump? That was the October surprise that we all recall. Whether he did it out of stupidity or vanity, he said he wanted the FBI to play a big role in American life. And I'm saying, nope, sorry, that is not your job description. So the FBI is totally notorious reactionary, and it's whiter than white. We had a lawsuit some years back by a bunch of black FBI agents about how they were discriminated against, mistreated, and I think that's certainly a valid point. And according to what happened, it was very white, and now it's gotten even whiter under Trump. So this is a terrible state of affairs, and it looks like nobody wants to rock the boat when it comes to this particular frame-up. But then back to this. What's with the infamous Hunter Biden laptop? This is really a lot of reactionary publicity, because this is all the public knows. If they know that there's a Hunter Biden laptop, I think it's kind of like Hillary Clinton and her emails of 2016. The emails, the laptop. And they actually rejuvenated or reiterated the idea of the Hillary Clinton emails in 2020. They did it again. The Republicans wanted that to be Hunter Biden's laptop. In other words, they wanted the laptop. And remember what Hitler said about lies, right? He said to his propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, lies, tell them lies. And that's what they wanted the laptop to be. They wanted the laptop to be that catchphrase like Hillary Clinton's emails, where a simple lie, simple misdirection that would cause everyone to be walking around saying, oh, the emails, oh, the emails, oh, the laptop, oh, the laptop. And that is in itself, it's kind of a utility verdict, isn't it? Because they didn't want it because they wanted to tell the truth to the American people. They wanted it for other reasons. They wanted it for defamation. They wanted it for targeting of a low information, easily led, fact challenge electorate. This is where the fascist right lives. This is their base. Well, if you want to use the Hunter Biden for laptop for various purposes of defamation of evidence or targeting, then you want to realize that you have to be able to prove when these changes were made. Now, what we're told is that there is no process in this trial to show when documents were edited, and I'm talking about the laptop now, were edited or deleted or edited and subtracted from Hunter Biden's laptop. It's not possible. And why is it not possible? Because typical internal files, that is to say, the monitoring files on the interior of this hard drive, they're gone. Whatever it is, those are gone. So it's impossible to say, technically and for all practical purposes, it is impossible to guarantee when and where certain files were added. So this means that this entire thing, just for the purposes of explaining how this could be corrupted, this could somehow have become a playground for the KGB, for example, for the FSB, for example, like the GRU, for example, the various ministries of state security in Beijing, the people with an obvious interest in damaging the Biden presidency and embarrassing the president. And because of what I just explained, and once again, this goes to the purity of the evidence, there's no guarantee that they haven't been tampered in the way that I described with this computer. I also think that there's every single reason to believe that it's possible that it was. Every single reason. And understand me now. I think it's monstrous, just monstrous. The fact that the same media who are interested in the details, and I say this to their credit, by the way, interested in the details of the case that we've just had on Center Street in Manhattan with the 34 felony convictions for the criminal Trump, that's what they were interested in. They took an interest in these details, and I think that's great. But now, once again, in the question of this elusive myth of both sidesism, which we do not believe in, we, for example, as I said, no fairness for fascism. Give them the letter, but don't give them anything else. And both sides, it's a lot of hogwash. They want to be able to say, look, we're not prejudiced. Look at the dirty job we've done on Hunter Biden. So it's too late to call upon the jury not to convict Hunter Biden. But what I can do now is bring to your attention the problems that this case has, which have been manipulated to be, again, as I say, a frame-up and a setup in order to damage Biden for political purposes. And this is Politics by Jake. So once again, we're out of time. We'll see you on the next edition, which will be June 24th at 7 a.m. And in the meantime, if you want to get more Politics by Jake, you can go to the YouTube page, which is youtube.com/@politicsbyjake, where I have not only these podcasts, but also videos of a lot of other material that unfortunately, because of time, we don't always get to on this show. And Facebook, where right now my page is Lawrence Jacobson. I have to change that. Twitter X, where my handle is JakeLaw08. That's JAKELAW08. Have to change that too. You can see some of my political comments there. You can also find my content on KCAA Listeners Group and Broadcasting for America. Those are also Facebook pages. And wow, what can I say? I mean, big topic here. And we probably will touch on it again as Hunter Biden will be coming up for sentencing, of course. And I think that there's a lot of risk for appeal here. It'll be very interesting to see what happens on that. And we will keep you informed. So until the 24th at 7 a.m., bye-bye. Have a great time, and we will see you safe and sound for yet another edition of Politics by Jake. Bye-bye now.